Good evening. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight for another episode of Beyond Design. Today we're starting a new mini series entitled Women in the AEC Industry. So for all the Tuesdays of July and August, we will be featuring six experts, all women, doing what they do best in the AEC. So I want all of you to invite your friends and tune in to watch all the episodes of our mini series Women in the 80s. So tonight we're very privileged to have as our guest architect Mariam Abouhadid. So Mariam has obtained her Ph.D. in environmental psychology at from the Department of Architecture Faculty of Engineering at Shams University. So she also finished her Master of Science degree in Architectural Heritage Digitization, digitization using BIM technology of the Department of Architecture Faculty of Engineering from Shams University as well. So, and she finished her undergraduate Bachelor of Science in Architectural Engineering um, from the same university. So in 2005, yeah, so she is a researcher with a background in architectural practice. She works currently as a researcher at the National Research Center, and she has been working there since 2006. She has um, she has been teaching uh, for she has been holding various teaching positions and is currently an adjunct assistant professor at American University. So she has many publications in architecture, particularly in heritage preservation and socio-economic aspects of heritage preservation, digital applications of architecture representations in other domains, as well as previous experiences in restoration of architectural heritage with the Aga Khan Foundation. So I present to you architect Mariam Abouhadid. So thank you, Mariam, for guesting tonight in our first episode of the mini series Women in the AEC Industry. So how are you? How's everything there in Egypt right now?
Hi Brian, how are you? I'm very glad to be here on your channel today on such a very interesting topic, which is women in the AEC industry, and I'm very honored to be with you and to be here with our audience. Everything is fine now in Egypt. Actually, after the pandemic is going. Hopefully now for the better. So I think that everything is getting opened after a while of being in lockdown for a very long time since March, and now it's everything is getting better, and hopefully we'll be able to live normally very soon, inshallah.
Okay, so um, Mariam, we're so privileged to have you here tonight, especially for such an accomplished researcher and an architect at that. We seldomly get to meet professionals who actually excel in both the professional practice and in the field of research. So before we proceed with the with the rest of the show, I would like to for all of you to know, those who are listening and the watching, that this episode tonight is not just your typical interview, but it has we have upgraded this into a talk. So Dr. Mariam has come prepared for this, and instead of just giving her answers, um, she has prepared a wonderful presentation for us tonight. So sit back and enjoy the rest of the show. And for those of you who are watching live with us, kindly kindly go to the comment section and just tell us um, who you are and from what org you are and or organization you are. And yeah, that's basically it. So in the course of the show, we will be taking in questions, and we will answer as much as we can, so that we want our guests tonight to our the viewers tonight to maximize the time that Dr. Mariam is here with us, because again, this is a very rare occasion. So, and for those of you who are really interested in research, we are very glad to tell you that the series that we have um, will feature Architect Mariam in two episodes. So for this first episode, we will talk about research in the academe, and for our episode next week, at the same time, we will talk about research in the practice. So this is to we have decided to do two shows for this one, because I think it has been a long forgotten skill, and now it is making its way back in in the practice, and it is actually now considered a newfound necessity in the practice of not only architecture, but for most professions in general. So okay, so thank you once again, and before we proceed with the actual presentation, we of course we'd like to know more about you, Architect Mariam. So, how long have you been practicing as an architect?
Well, Brian, thank you for the introduction first. And I have been in practice since, well, maybe before 2005, which means more than 15 years, because I started early on when I was in college, during summer trainings. And I have seen actually many sort of practices in Egypt, starting with the construction industry as a normal construction, very big construction entity in Egypt. And then I started working for heritage preservation for a while with the Aga Khan Foundation in Egypt. And this is actually was my first passion in architectural practice, which is the heritage preservation. And since, as you know, that in Egypt we have lots of historic sites and historic buildings that are always subject to restoration and preservation, and because then we have lots of touristic sites and so on. So this was actually my first passion in architecture, in architectural practice, if I can say so. And afterwards, I began my research career, my academic career, and I joined the National Research Center in Egypt. For 15 years now, or for 14 years now. I started with my master's degree in architectural heritage documentation and digitization, which means that we have having digital records of our architectural heritage and the methods to do so. And then I had my Ph.D. in environmental psychology, which was another like another passion for me in architecture, which is what is the relationship between the humans and their surrounding, their built environment. Because I have seen that after everything, architects and construction professionals are all about dealing with humans. They are trying to design places for humans, that they are trying to deal with human beings, and they are making their lives. So in order to make a better quality of life for humans. We have to understand their psychology and how they react to different places. So this was a partially my PhD, and it was also in a historic setting in Egypt and in Cairo. And afterwards, I started my postdoctoral research work, which is academic papers in many domains in architecture. I have for a while worked for designing some home accessories. I worked in design and manufacture. I also worked with children and how to introduce them to architectural concepts with a very simple ways and very hands-on approaches, and hand-on approaches, and mostly. And then now I'm teaching at the American University in Cairo. I'm teaching digital tools for undergrads, and this is it mostly. So I've been through many areas in the practice and in academia, and what inspired me to do this talk with you is that when we are talking about practice and academia, we're talking about two. In reality, it happens that there is a very large gap between the two sides, the practice, the research, and the practice in architecture and every other domain. But some domains, like the medical domain, for example, are more comprehensive of the importance of research in the practice. They are more, they are embedding very smoothly research in the practice. Unlike architecture, we don't have this kind of synchronization between both domains. We have like a very, very strong separation between the two domains, although we can never work in practice alone without research, and we can never do research without having an impact in practice or without having a case studies from practice. So they have to go along in many ways, whether we liked it or not, in order to make the most out of the two domains. So this is, to sum it up, Yani, what was really important to emphasize in this talk.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree with you there. I think it's to our envy that other fields, especially the medical profession, has adopted research as a very much integral part of both the practice and the academe. And I hope we will be able to advocate for the same approach or the same mindset in the architectural profession. So, Mariam, what is your in the many fields of research that you have been involved with? What is your favorite or favorite area of interest?
Well, it differs, and it changes with time. At the beginning, it was heritage preservation, it was the historic preservation, it was the historic documentation, it was everything that has to deal with the history of places and in Egypt and around the world. But then, and maybe as an undergraduate, I was very fond of digital renderings and digital modeling and all the computational design areas. But then I'm again now into digital practices, into digital fabrication. I'm very fond of how this area is getting developed day by day, and how the technology is taking over everything in drafting and in manufacturing. So this is now somehow my newfound passion, but I think that I still have this passion for heritage preservation, although I'm not really into practicing it now. But you know, this is something that research gives you easily. It gives you the opportunity to explore many areas, because you work on a single paper in one domain, so you can work on 10 papers, for example, from 10 different domains in architecture without having any limitations. So this is something that research can provide you with, the flexibility to work on different domains and fulfill all your passions and experiment in many areas without having any restrictions. So so if you were asking me right now what is my favorite or my definite passion towards in architecture, it will be definitely digital drafting and the new technology and what is happening around the world in this area.
Yeah, I think that's very timely to be interested in digital fabrications and virtual design and construction, as I think this global pandemic has proven that there is a need to maximize technology so that activities can be many of the activities that can be done offsite can be done
Exactly.
offsite, and this is really something that has to be explored and maximized as a way of moving forward in what they say as the new normal. And I think we are not spared in the construction industry is not spared into that new normal. In fact, we are very much we're the industry that is very much affected by it, and I'm sure that research in this field would really take a big role in pushing this new normal in the field of construction. So so far, in your 15 years of practice as an architect and as a researcher, um, how has it been so far? Is there something? Are you still excited to move forward with this, or I mean, some professionals would, after 15 to 20 years, would say, "I've had enough of this, and I want to explore something new." But how about you? What's how has it been so far, and how do you see yourself moving forward in this domain of architecture and research?
Well, actually, this is something also that I see very positive in the architectural domain. Architecture provides us with everything. It has philosophy in it. It has writing. You can write in research. You read because you're doing research, so you're reading a lot. You can do handcrafts because you can do physical models for your products. You have a very vast space for creativity and for design and for whatever field that makes you creative and makes your mind always awake and aware of the design trends, new design trends. So you can do basically anything, any kind of
Mm,
arts writing skills. It provides you with everything. So architecture is a very large umbrella of possibilities and opportunities and potential to fulfill all your passions. So I cannot see myself doing anything else in the world, actually, because I think that although I wasn't really at the beginning of my career, I wasn't really very excited about starting working in research in particular, because research is very overlooked. It's underlooked. I mean that people look for academia, for the academia, and for researchers from above, as if this is something that is not good enough. This is not something that is very well needed for the practice. This is something that is not fulfilling you financially or fulfilling the practice with any real outcome or physical outcome or tangible outcome. So research was not really, it was something that I was testing waters to go through or not. But after that I had some kind of experience in it, the more I do it, the more I'm fulfilled. And the more I do it, the more I think that this is the most important thing in the whole world, how to explore new ideas and concepts, and how to experiment, keeping experimenting them, and seeing how to move forward with ideas, and how to leave something for future studies and for future researchers. So I think that I cannot ask for more actually in my career. Actually, I'm asking for more. I mean, I want to develop, but I want to develop in whatever I am doing right now. And I really would like to experiment further in digital fabrication and digital manufacturing, because this is something that I'm truly interested in, along with the 3D printing and everything that has to do with manufacturing 3D models, or 3D actually products. So this is something that I would like to really be doing in the future. And but that's it. Along with research, of course, because I think that research will never stop for me as long as I'm in the practice. Yeah.
And research really takes you beyond design. I think
Yes.
for many, in almost all places around the world, it is a common misconception that if you are an architect, you must be designing, or you must be just designing, or you must be designing, and other possibilities or other skills should be just go around it. But but research proves that there is more to just designing. So Mariam, so so you are excited to move forward with this, and with what you just shared, I'm really excited to to present to our audience now what you have prepared for tonight. So, and before we do that, I'd like to encourage everyone to to feel free to ask questions as we go along the presentation. So as we proceed with the presentation. So okay, so let's do this. Oops. Okay. Um yeah. Um Mariam, we can proceed with your presentation with slides.
Okay. I will share it again because I was sharing it, and then for some reason it's not here anymore. So I guess maybe you can share it from your PC, I guess.
Okay. So
We can start with the question number 1. Yes, there.
okay.
So yeah.
So the first question. So in this presentation, what we did was actually Architect Mariam has already compiled them, and so the first question is what about the necessity of research. Who needs to learn the skill of research?
Well, as I told you, Brian, before, so the research, I guess, is the most important part of anything, any practice, as you said also. So, who needs to learn the skill of research? Well, researchers, of course, do. Academics, anyone who's teaching or working as a professor or a postgrad student, of course. Community developers, people who are working in community development projects, and heritage architects, also undergrad students for their projects and their assignments and all their the submission they have to learn the skill of research, of systematic research, in order to have it for after graduation and during their undergrad studies. Architects and any practitioner in any domain actually needs research. So in the coming slides, I'm telling you the areas in which an architect or a construction professional needs research. So this is the next slide. So I'm telling you that, yeah. Anyway, there is a missing slide, but I will tell you briefly. So you have, as a practitioner in a running practice, you need research. During the practice, during the project, you need to make research around this project. In responding to a brief or something around any project, in a feasibility and design and post occupancy. And this is something that we are going to talk about the next session, which is when do we need research in practice. So this is the first part, who needs to learn research. So yes, and you were asking me here in the second question.
Yeah, in this day and age where everything can be Googled, so how is research different from the rest of the information products that are out there online? I mean, it's easy for me to just grab information in the from the internet, and is that actually research? So if it's not research, or it's just part of research, so what makes research very distinct from the rest of the information out there?
So what you're doing when you're Googling information online is that you're doing a sort of data collection or data gathering. This is, this song about medical students who made it to tell the audience, please do not Google your symptoms. So because all of us, maybe when we have any symptom, we just Google, I have a headache. So what is this? And then the Google tells me, oh, you might have cancer, you might have whatever. So does that make me a medical professional? Does this make me really make a real and right and professional diagnosis of what I have? Of course not. So Googling is just kind of a data collection or a data gathering. It's non-systematic, and it doesn't get me the real outcome or conclusion that I need. Research, however, is a very systematic process. It has a very solid rules that you have to stick by step by step in order to reach a solid conclusion that is reliable and valid, and that is, of course, scientific at the end of the day. Because so random Googling is partially, it's a part of the data collection, and data gathering, but is it professional or scientific? Does it get you the real conclusions? No, it doesn't. It does not. So no, it is not research, and it cannot be because you never know what is the real reference of whoever is writing this online. So you have to proceed with the research system in order to understand any subject.
Yeah. So in your experience, what are the common problems or weaknesses of architecture and engineering students in doing the research? How can they be resolved?
Well, undergraduate students doesn't really learn research methods. When we were undergrads, we didn't really learn it. So we learned it the hard way when we were doing research after graduations. So the weaknesses, they range from grammatical mistakes and writing mistakes, incomplete pilot study, literature review that is not really enough, invalid or unreliable measurement tools. When they have the measurement tools that they make an experiment, for example, and they're trying to measure this, whatever is the phenomena they are trying to test. So they might try with a measurement tool that is not valid or reliable. They might be biased, which is being subjective, not being completely objective. When you're doing research, you have to be in the middle of
Mm.
the phenomena. You have not taking this side or that side. You're testing the hypothesis completely objectively, without having any bias or without having any inclination towards this or that theory, in order to reach the completely objective conclusion and make sure if your hypothesis was really reliable. So the mistakes and weaknesses while they're doing their research are really due to many factors as well, because as I told you, research is not given the importance it should have.
Mm.
So students just do it sporadically, randomly, without really understanding the system, how it should go, how it should work in order to make a reliable scientific research.
Okay. So in that case, how should students do the research? Are there wrong and right ways to do it? What is the most important attitude that a researcher should have when doing research?
Well, as I told you, the most important attitude when they are doing their research, as, besides, of course, following the structured and the scientific method, is that they have to be completely objective, which means that they should not be biased with any idea. For example, if I'm trying to prove that the Earth is a sphere, a spherical, yeah,
It's not
flat.
flat.
It's not flat. Yeah. So if I'm trying to make this to test this hypothesis, I should not have any idea in my mind proving that yes, it is spherical. I should be completely objective, completely in the middle, and I should have use the scientific methods in order to test this hypothesis and prove it right or wrong, which is it spherical or not. So I have to use my tool, which will be, for example, the telescope, whatever it is, the tools that I will be using in order to prove my hypothesis right or wrong. But I should be completely objective and unbiased in my testing. So this is the most important attitude when I'm doing any research and any person is doing research, and following, of course, the structure of research.
Okay, so I think wherever you are, bias really is the thing that kills, or that bias is something that often gets in the way of uh, of finding out what is truth and what is the truth, and what is true and relevant. So yeah, I agree that that bias has to be done away with in in research and in anywhere else. So
Yes, of course. Yes,
yeah.
yes, of
So
course, of course. Because what really present a real hindrance in understanding between people, for example, or between any two point of views, is that everyone is biased always, and everyone is always taking a side, and everyone is
mm,
sometimes very fond of his idea and what he believes in. So this is completely subjective, and people are humans are generally subjective. They take sides. So the most important, in order to listen, to be able to listen and acquire knowledge, is to be unbiased.
yeah, and uh, even philosophers believe that the hardest thing to remove from any field of study is not the presence of factual or formal errors, but really it is the bias. No? So, for everybody, for those of you who are watching this episode live, and for those who will be watching um, the recorded version of this, just to let everybody know that Mariam has contributed, has written in international journals in the field of architecture. So for this next question, she would really be in a position to answer about what about the areas or topics that is that are most in demand globally. So, or the current trends in research topics in the academe.
So, well, currently there are many areas. Some of them have been there for a while, for maybe more than 40 and 50 years in architectural research, if it might exist, if it was there,
Mhm.
yani. Well, the old, for example, trends were like the art and history, the history of art and architecture. This was an old trend or domain in architecture. Also, heritage studies and conservation of historic areas. This was also an old trend or an old domain. Environmental studies, which are the everything that has to do with energy, thermal comfort, air quality, the daylight savings, the ventilation, and everything is yani it was an old domain, but now it's coming into
Mhm.
the very trendy domains in architecture since the use of Ecotect and Design Builder and all the thermal analysis software has emerged. So this has been now one of the major trends in architectural practice and in architectural research and studies, of course. Also, digital tools and fabrication is now one of the top trends in
Mhm.
architectural research and practice. Actually, both of them. Oh, everything that has to do with building information modeling, with cloud computing, 3D printing, CNC machines, and everything that has to do with it's really used in everything, in research, in studies, in interior design, and in everything. Well, يعني in research and practice, which is the digital tools and fabrication. Another domain like the building science and technology, like the materials, the construction technology, the BIM on site, the BIM apps and application, the mobile apps now, or the tablet apps for building information modeling. So this technology also is like a newcomer to the building technology or the construction technology, the conventional or traditional construction technology. So this is adding another dimension to building science and technology. Another domain like the socio-behavioral studies, like environmental psychology and how the people react to different environments, the humans, to the relationship between the humans and their environment. This is a recently yeah, an important topic that very few actually give importance to in the field of architecture around the world. I have truly no idea exactly what are the reasons this this kind of domain in architecture is overlooked. I'm not sure actually why, since I see it personally and subjectively as the most important of all other domains, because it
Mhm.
has to do directly with how humans feel about their environment and how the environment affects them in a positive or negative way. So anyway, so this is one of the domains that are not that trendy but are very important. However, another old trend or old domain, which is design theories and approaches of architecture, like the schools of design and now the current or recent schools like the generative and parametric design.
Mhm.
So there has been lots of domains, as I told you. Some of them are very traditional. They are not that kind of, they are a little bit static. And some of them are very dynamic. They are growing, and the sky is the limit for them.
Yeah, it's amazing how the current situation will actually emphasize on this current trends because even for social behavioral studies, I think that will involve the study of people's movements according to how they perceive their environment. And right now, our I think probably the current research topics will get deeper into into the psychology of space and how to decongest spaces uh, through proper environmental psychology, especially in times of pandemic. So, so how about
Yeah.
these trends?
Yes, those I already explained them. They are also mostly old, but they are not that growing trends right now at the moment, except for the energy efficiency,
Hmm.
as we spoke.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing how how fast the development of how fast the different standards for building sustainability and energy efficiency is developing. I think there's really a lot out there, and it would be interesting to note which one is most applicable in the different regions of the world. So,
Of
um,
course.
okay, how about the most common architecture careers with regard to research and practice?
Well, as I told you, because now, يعني, till now, there is this gap between research and practice.
Mhm.
So you're either a researcher or a practitioner, which is not always the very good thing. And as I'm telling you, there is no gap between them. But يعني, for the time being, and for how we see it, or for how traditionally we see it, as a researcher, you can work for a research institution, for a university. So you will be doing research and teaching as well, or as a freelance postgraduate student. In practice, you have a multitude of options and opportunities and potential. You can work for historic preservation. You can work for design and construction field, which is a very, very big domain, including interior design, including on-site construction work, and including design work in companies, and everything that has to do with it. And then you can work for urban or community development projects, which are usually and normally very or mostly human oriented, for the
Mhm.
people living in communities that need some development. So those mostly are the most common careers that people can, or students, or fresh graduates can just choose between. And well, if I have to say what if a fresh graduate should be doing after graduating, is that they should be trying many areas in order to understand what is truly their passion and where they want to go,
Okay,
and what they
so
want to do, yes, for
yeah,
their
and
career. Yeah.
that should really include research as one of the options.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
and it should include research as a parallel option all throughout their
yeah,
practice. Yeah, this
yeah.
is how I
Regardless
see
of
it.
the domain, like for example,
Yes,
I'm focused more on construction management. I mean, research should always be um, should go side by side with any field of specialization that you will choose within the AEC industry. So,
exactly.
how about the new challenge? What are the new challenges in architecture and the emerging technologies?
Um, uh, well, new challenges are, as I told you before, that are mainly in the domains of digital tools and fabrication, and in the domain of growing technologies, and how technology is being embedded in construction work, in environmental studies and energy studies. So those four domains, which are in this slide and the coming one: the digital tools and fabrication, the building science and technology, environmental studies, and energy efficiency. So those four domains are the most challenging and the most growing fields in architectural practice. However, interior design is is always changing. It's always changing because it really relies on trends, on differing trends, and sometimes it's towards minimalism. Other times it's towards natural design and how to embed nature in an environment, and then it changes from classic to modern and vice versa. So the interior design is always challenging. The less challenging or the less changing actually domains are, as I told you, were art and history, because this is something that is not changing. Heritage studies as well, and socio-behavioral studies, it's not changing. And it is something that maybe we lack theories, we lack experimentations, but it is not changing. And the design theories as well are not that static, are not that dynamic, I mean, I'm sorry. So the four areas that we have mentioned are the most challenging regarding growing technologies and how they interact with this growing knowledge and growing technology within.
Okay, so that's as you said, that's digital tools and fabrications, building science and technology,
Yes.
environmental studies, and energy efficiency as the four main challenging areas in the field of research. So I think art and history does change, but over centuries. So probably the 100 years from now, the
Yes.
changes will be more evident.
Yes.
So
On the long run, yes. Yes.
yeah. So how about this? What are the static versus dynamic topics in research in this current area, in
Well,
this
I have
practice?
seen that the eight or the nine areas that we have here mentioned, they are all dynamic. I think that they are all changing. They are all growing somehow, except for the art and history part that is really
Mm-hmm.
changing on a very long term basis. Yes. So otherwise, the rest of them, they are changing. They are dynamic, and there are new trends every day in those areas.
Okay. So when we speak of static, it means there's hardly any uh, visible changes on a
Yes,
shorter
in the body
time.
of knowledge, there are
Mhm.
no significant changes in this body of knowledge. Yes,
Versus the dynamic, which changes
which
so
is
fast.
changes very fast, day
Okay.
by day, maybe even in technology related areas.
Okay. So let's there. So how I think this is a very interesting question as to the direction of research. Do we research? Do we move back, going to the past, or do we move forward into the future?
This is a question that really has no answer, because while we're doing research, we always find this very interesting relation between the past and everything that is designed for the humans, which means that vernacular architectural, for example, it has everything that the humans needed. It has
Mhm.
provided the humans with shelters, with design that are very relaxing for them. It provided them with natural ventilation, natural lighting, and everything that makes a human comfortable in his built environment. So it has used the materials that exist in his environment, that exists around him, which are wherever he exists, the materials are always around him from his environment, to provide him with the thermal comfort, with acoustic comfort, with visual comfort, and with every kind of comfort. So as we go through the modernism, and afterwards to high tech architecture, and to more industrialized architecture, we find that humans have been alienated from what they truly need in their built environment, because what the humans need is far from living in a factory like building. and is very far from using materials that are cold, like the steel and glass, that are not providing them with the sense of security, with the sense of visual or acoustic or thermal or any kind of comfort that the human needs in their environment. So are we going to the past or the future? Well, some research is going to the past because they are proving by evidence what the past has from benefits to the humans in architecture, how it benefited the architecture in the past or benefited the humans. And some other research are going to the future. They are trying to work for parametric design and for, as I told you, the digital trends and how to make use of new materials and the mass production of materials and of buildings and of settlements and everything. So who will win at the end of the day? I do not think that we have a winner so far, because I think that common sense might direct researchers somewhere, but there are other factors that might direct us to other ways, like economic factors and something that has to do with the industry of materials and business around the world and the economy of the world. So where are we going exactly? It's not that clear, actually, but research is going in all ways.
Yeah, I like what you said, that when you said we study the past, but to establish by proof of evidence, and I think this is something that we should all be doing in our practice. We should be practicing evidence-based design, evidence-based construction management, evidence-based research. I mean, it's really critical for us to know what know the fundamentals and the true fundamentals, the true information, the real information that we need to support, to really learn the present time, or the issues of the present time, and how we can move forward with it. So yeah, and Mariam, in it's not only when it comes to parametrics, it's not only in the field of design, but even for the fields of our specialized fields of cost management, construction cost management, and time management. It's very it's very critical for us to, or for architects to learn parametric relationships, not only parametric relationships for building attributes and building elements, so that we can make better decisions even before we get into any detailed design. This parametric relationships can guide us in making better decisions when it comes to establishing even the scope of the project. So this is for this next question. I think this is something that everyone in the practice should really understand: is how to integrate research in the practice.
Well, this part we'll be talking about next section, in session 2 next week. But for now, we have three parts where we can integrate research in the practice. The first one will be the client-based research. When we are doing research about the client needs and their socio-cultural background and whatever environment that they're working or living in, and what they want to see. So, for example, when Frank Lloyd Wright was designing buildings for many people, he always used to understand their story and make this research about their story and about their preferences and what they want to see, where they want to live, what they want to experience in their surrounding. So this from there came, for example, the falling water design from the client. So the client inspired Frank Lloyd Wright with whatever they wanted to have. So this is, for example, the client-based research. Another approach will be the project-based research, when I do all my research about the site and energy design and materials and technology and whatever is needed for this particular project. And this is something that is actually recently it is done in many architectural firms, as we are going to see in our next session. And we are going to see examples of project-based research that many practitioners in architecture has been doing in their firms. So another approach will be the standalone research, which is not related to any client in particular or any project in particular. But this is very rare till this moment, which means that not many firms or practitioners do or conduct research without having a particular project or client that they want to research about. So those are the three main approaches as a whole, as general idea of the approaches of how to integrate research and the practice. But we will be doing a lot more of examples of what is really done nowadays in the practice regarding research for session 2, inshallah.
Okay, so there's more to unpack in session 2. So for those
Yes.
of you who are tuning in tonight, there will be a part 2 to this sessions about research with architect Mariam. So, and Mariam, when you said standalone research, I think now I think there are now many independent researchers, standalone researches that are being done in light of the current situation. And I hope that even without the pandemic, this trend will continue. I think some areas of interest now that are really being studied on with regard to technology and materials is the application of UVC light um, for fighting this the virus. Not only this coronavirus, but the spectrum of virus in which the coronavirus is a part of. So and I think with regard to in, indoor environment, IAQ, especially in as it relates to the transmission of these kinds of virus in enclosed spaces, enclosed aircon spaces. So this is really something that is starting to get popular nowadays. So, and I hope let's just hope that the trend continues in that standalone research.
Of course.
So how does a graduate keep updated with construction technologies, building materials? So how can they explore the different areas of practice where they can probably get certified or get credentialed?
Well, till now, in architecture and construction field, continuing your education after graduation is a very optional thing. It's not obligatory to have any kind of certificates after your graduation from college and having your bachelor degree. But in other fields like medicine, for example, practitioners have obligatory and yearly exams in practice in order to have their appraisal and their yearly assessment in order to be there in the practice and to continue practicing medicine. So they have this continuing professional development assessments. It's always done and periodically they are assessed. So in architecture, this doesn't exist. It is very optional. For example, in the UK, in the coming slides, you will see that there is this continuing professional development areas like the agriculture, the business, construction, design, education, energy, engineering, finance. So there are those courses of continuing professional development in the UK, but they are completely optional. You are not obliged, but by any by any way, to continue your education after your bachelor degree. And this is somehow a deficiency, I think, in many practices. To mention the architecture, now we're mentioning architecture. This is a deficiency. I see it as a deficiency because everything is getting updated every day. The technology is they change every day. And if we're not updated with everything, how can we do the practice? Are we working the same way that we were working 10 years before now or 20 years before now? Of course not. So this is a very big question mark in how we are not assessing our practitioners in architecture on a periodic basis. So this is a very strange thing to have for now. But for fresh graduates, my advice will be that you will have to keep yourself updated, that you will have to keep reading in the field, that you will have to keep taking courses in whatever new field or new software that is emerging, that you will have to keep yourself updated, even if this is not obligatory, because otherwise you will be working the same thing for the same years, and by 50, when you're 50 or when you're 60 years old, you feel completely outdated and out of the world, and you will not be able to conform to the new norms. So from now, I'm telling myself and everyone that we should always having those kinds of updates in our practice, which is somehow a form of research.
Yeah. Mariam, that is the issue of CPD is a very controversial issue in the Philippines. In fact, it's a really sad reality that some are fighting it out, that that the requirements for continuing professional development be removed from renewal, which I think I will have to agree with you. And then many of our friends globally are really seeing the benefits of having a continuing professional development. And you pointed out that in other fields, like in the field of medicine, it is an obligation. It is required. So, and some of us may wonder how come the medical profession is at the top of is always perceived to be at the top of that pyramid of professions. And I think one of the ways by which we can also reach that pinnacle is that for us to as an industry to have that commitment that even when it is no longer required of us, that we actually get into these CPD programs out of our own desire to learn, to improve, and to be the best that we can be in this industry. And I think, just as you said, no, this can be achieved also by way of research. So, okay, so let's just talk about this in particular, architectural research. What is it really? What makes it different from other researches?
So, well, architectural research, it was maybe at the beginning of the practice, it has been conducted in a more like this random way. It was not that systematic, and by the time when the time was going and development of the practice, methods have been more and more obvious to the architectural researchers. So they have those categorization of the fields and the areas and the types of research that can be conducted in architecture. So they have those categories like the first category will be categorizing research. Either it is a pure basic research, or strategic basic research, or applied research. So the first one, when it's a purely theoretical work to acquire a new knowledge, when you are testing a theory, when it's something that is purely about knowledge and testing a theory and or a phenomena, for example, but through a theory, a theoretical approach or a method. The second one, which is strategic basic research, when this is directed globally or generally towards coming out with a solid outcome, like a model or a framework or guidelines or something to like organize some kind of a topic or phenomena or theory that you had. So the second one, which is the strategic research, this is done when you have this phenomena that you want to test and you want to come up with something that organizes this phenomena or make it come into light or come into more of a solid outcome. Yani. The third one will be the applied research, when you have this to acquire a new knowledge, but you do it through experiments, through a very tangible experiment, and you come with a solid outcome like a product or a software or a solution to a problem. So here the types of research has been categorized according to how they are conducted and what is the outcome of this type of research.
Okay, I'm just curious, Mariam. How about a thesis? Well, in which type of research does undergrad thesis usually fall under?
It can be any of the three, actually, because sometimes they can come up with a model and sometimes they come up with a software or a solution or a product. So sometimes it's, but most of the time, any undergraduate thesis or a master degree is most of the time required or acquired after conducting a pure basic research, which doesn't really come up with a product. It doesn't really come up with a solid outcome. And in the PhD, which is the Doctor of Philosophy, this is when we more use the strategic research or the applied research type in order to come up with real solid outcomes, because this is then it is required in order to make your or fulfill your PhD.
Oh, so yeah, just I think this is just a graphic that I
Yeah.
missed. Yeah. So it says here evidence-based design and knowledge-based design, and there's no way to do that other than integrating research in in the practice, right?
Yes. Basically, here, this is the doctor in the picture is called Dr. Shadi Atiyah. He's working in I think in a University of Liège in Belgium. This is how I remember it. So I might be mistaken, but this is how I remember it. He has really made this categorization of the science of architecture. The science of architecture, he categorized it into three types of sciences: the architecture, the planning and urbanism, and the landscape. So some of them has those sides, those human and social sciences sides, and other has the engineering and technical sides. So, and there is the design. So he just like trying to categorize in which area are we conducting research exactly in order to choose the right methodology and tools to test this phenomena that we are working on. So if we're, for example, working on a human subject or a human case, so we use statistics, surveys, interviews, focus groups, which are groups of people. We make interviews with a group of people in order to come up with our conclusion. If we are dealing with an engineering and technical subject, then we use other tools like measurement tools, like experimentation, which is a very solid and lab oriented type of methods, and maybe modeling or simulation or whatever that can come up with the conclusion that we are looking for. So this is how he made this categorization of the architectural science in general in order to choose which method are we working with. And
Okay.
this is, I find, a very important model in order to identify what we are doing, what kind of research we are doing.
Yeah. So, just before we proceed, I would like again to remind to encourage the audience to type your questions and add the comment section, and just indicate who it is addressed to, so that we can respond to them, and Architect Mariam can respond to them as they come. So, okay, so just briefly, Mariam, how did architectural research evolve to where it is now?
Okay. As it was mentioned in the 1950s, which is a very early timing in the practice, the research was all about the climate, how to make the ventilation, for example, in the buildings, the product development, building systems design, which means, for example, the mechanical parts of the building, as I said, the ventilation part, the lighting systems. So this was the main type of research that was conducted in the 50s in the architectural domain, because this it was an emerging technology at the time, which was the lighting and the ventilation types and the mechanical systems in buildings. So this was the time where those were the trend in research. In the 1960s and 70s, the socio-behavioral issues emerged as environmental psychology emerged in the 60s of the at the time. So more of the socio-behavioral science and the design theories and the relationship between humans and buildings and their environment, of course, and the design methods and energy conservation started to emerge as well. After this, in the 1970s, outside the confines of specific building projects, which means that we went out, or researchers went out of the traditional or the project oriented research into a more broad minded or broad areas and domains of research. So we started questioning other areas that are not project oriented in research. And by the 2000s and till this moment, we have more funding agencies started to emerge and to fund research projects in the area of architecture, to be working more in experimentations and in pardon me, and in coming up with prototypes and models and software and products. So funding started to emerge in the area of architectural research.
Okay. Mariam, there's just the question here, and first we'd like to greet some of our viewers. We have Murad Tutu and Architect Fleet Makasil and Architect Boz. Architect Boz, thank you for watching. Uh, uh, he you never I am very, this Architect Boss is always watching our shows. Thank you very much for always tuning in, and he has a question for you, Mariam. Are we lacking in architect researchers? Is it an in demand career worldwide? Can newly graduates mostly will work on immediately on design? Okay, so is it, I think what he's trying to say here is that something that can be explored by newly graduates for a probably a profitable career or fulfilling career?
Well, as I told you, Archibos, as I told you earlier in the presentation in our talk, that unfortunately research is not well established in the architectural domain yet. And I'm saying yet because hopefully by the coming years, and now there are many firms, as we are going to watch in session 2, who are really embedding research in their practice, in their firms, inside the firm or the architectural firm or the construction firm. There is a part of that is really headed towards research, whether it's for projects, clients oriented, or open research in general. So for the time being, no, not yet. I wouldn't say that research is that much embedded in the practice, but it is there. It is there in research institutions. It exists in universities, at universities. It exists. And I think that any postgraduate student has much more opportunities in the practice than any person than any other postgrad or yeah, yes, a postgraduate architect. So I think that yes, and research is getting better opportunities now, I think, in firms, as I will show you in our next session. I will show you how firms are treating research now. So this is how I see research development in architecture. I cannot see, because the academia as a on its by itself is not that growing. It will continue as it is, but research in practice is a very, very promising career, and I think that it will be flourishing and growing as we go, because technology is taking us places now, and practice cannot move without having a research department that is working in parallel with their practice. I mean, yeah.
Okay. And it's I think while it is still uh, in development, I mean the demand is on the rise. Not yet at the peak.
Yes.
Not yet at the peak. It is the best time to actually get into it, because if it's already at the peak, then most likely the next part of that is I mean, after it peaks, it just drops, right? So while it's while it is on its way, it is best to get into it. So
Exactly.
there's just a greeting here from our viewer. Hi, John. Thanks for watching. Hello, Mariam. Okay,
Hello, John. How are you?
so okay, let's continue with yeah, with your presentation. So for postgraduate researchers, what are the challenges?
Well, as we said already, that if you're not working in academia, you don't have any obligations of any kind to pursue research. So your challenge will be that if you're working at a design firm or a construction firm, that you will only do research when it's directly related to the project that you're working on. Otherwise, you will be like a postgraduate freelance postgraduate student, or a freelance postgraduate student, and you will have many challenges in order to fund your research, in
Hmm.
order to market your product if you have any product, in order to find case studies for your research, because case studies exist in firms, exist in construction, on construction sites. So you will have those challenges: how to find the data, where to get the data from, your data from, how to fund your research and your experiments, and how to market your conclusion and your product at the end of of your research done. So you will have many challenges. They will face many challenges conducting research, especially if they are on their own and not backed by any funding agency, or not backed by any research institution or a university.
Okay, so okay, I think the next one that you have here is about
It's about the funding. It's about yeah. I'm sorry. It's about the research and development or community development projects had 15% of the funding. Yani whenever there is a project for community
Mhm.
development, they pay for example, for the infrastructure, 35% of their funding. For the research, they pay 15% of their funding for research alone. So
Mhm.
this is something that sets a flag here that yes, we do fund research, especially when we're dealing with community development projects, because now we're working with a community that is already existing. We have
Mhm.
to understand what are the dynamics within this community and the people who exist there and the already existing environment and built environment. So we have to understand tons of things. In order to do that, we conduct research. So this is an example of research and practice that is working and that is having very high rates of funding within their practice, like the community development projects, I mean.
So when it comes to funding, this is one area that easily gets support.
Yes,
Community development projects. So
exactly.
I think this is many of those who are watching who will be taking their thesis is very much interested in this one. How do how do they how should they conduct research?
Well, this is a very also systematic, as I said, process. It's a very technical process, and it requires lots of maybe some readings at least. But the main parts of the body of research or the structure of research is the following. First, you have the formation of the topic. You have to choose the topic. What is the topic that I'm going to work on? What is my point and my title, for example? And then I will have a hypothesis. As I said, it's a testable prediction. My hypothesis here would be, for example, that the Earth is a sphere. It is spherical. Okay, so this is the hypothesis that, for example, for our example would be. So I want to test this hypothesis. I want to prove it either right or wrong. In order to do so, I have to follow some steps. So the first step would be to have a conceptual definition of my problem. What is the problem? Well, the problem is that I do not know whether the Earth is a sphere or not. For example, the problem might be anything in the world. So you have a research problem. Afterwards, you have to make an operational definition of variables. What is the variables? The variables are the things that you are going to be measuring, that you are going to be testing. So you will have to define each variable or each criteria that you are going to be testing. And then comes the data gathering, the data analysis, the data interpretation. And this is done through different methods and tools, whether by experimentation, whether by surveys, whether by, as I said, interviews. So this depends on the type of research that I'm conducting. And then I will have, by the end of this experimentation or testing, I will have a conclusion. I will come up with a final conclusion. What were the results? First, the results of my experimentation, and then the conclusion of the research as a whole. And what do I recommend? What are my future recommendations for future studies in this topic? And then I conclude with the references that each part of the research has to be taken or from a certain reference which is reliable, like a published paper or a published book, and so on. So this is in general how do I conduct research, how do I write research. It differs, of course, depending on the type of research that I'm conducting, on the type of data, on the type of experimentation. But at the end of the day, those are the major points that I should be following when I'm writing a research or doing a research. Yeah.
Okay. And the next one, the different types of research. What are they?
Well, there are two types to name. There are lots of types actually of research, as we're going to see maybe next time. And in our references, there are many types of research, but the two major types of research when I'm conducting, it's either quantitative one or a qualitative one. The quantitative research is when I have something to be measured. It's very solid. I come up with numbers, with statistics, with something that can be measured. When it's a qualitative research, well, qualitative is about mainly an analysis of descriptions, of views and opinions. So it's something a little bit subjective and hard to be measured. Okay, there are other types like exploratory research. When I'm exploring a phenomena, I'm trying to get and dig deep into a phenomena to come up with maybe I will have then a case studies in order to study this phenomena. So this is something that is called exploratory research. Another type will be the attitudinal research when I'm evaluating the attitude of humans, and this is something also that where I will be using surveys and mostly social study methods in my research.
Um, Mariam, there's just a question now.
Yes.
Um, for Architect Mariam, in your country, Egypt, is there in your country, Egypt, is there a national law mandating every professional to get certain CPD units before they can renew their respective professional licenses, or just an institution obligated? For example, the Egyptian Institution of Architects.
As far as I know, يعني, there are no CPD, obligatory CPDs in Egypt for architects. It doesn't exist. Maybe for the firms, they have to renew their licenses of just for for practice, but it has something that is purely paperwork. It doesn't have anything to do with the science or research or anything that has to do with the development or of the practice in itself, of the core practice. So no, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, we don't have any CPDs in Egypt that is obligatory of any kind. Yes, no, we don't.
Okay. So, Murad, it would be helpful also if you can share with us where you're from, and if there is an obligatory CPD in your country. In the Philippines, there is currently, but as I said, it's sad that many professionals are fighting against it and would like to have it abolished. So, um,
This is new. I never knew that you had this in your country. Anyway, I didn't
well,
knew that you had CPD in Philippines.
I think when we first met in 2006, it wasn't obligatory yet.
Mm,
It has been there, but it was optional.
yeah.
But
Okay.
I think since 2016, it has become obligatory. It
Mm,
is required by law, and
mm,
the way I understand it, was supposed to be. It was the requirement was because of the it was a requirement for globalization. So
mm,
where remember there was at that time there was a pending ASEAN integration, and supposedly in 2020 there
mm.
is uh, there's a total borderless practice. I think this has something to do with WTO, but yeah, but I right now uh, I think it's on its way to being junked, which is really
Okay.
really sad. We were moving in the right direction, and now it's going to be set aside. And it's a very controversial issue. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah,
Mm.
moving forward. What are the other classifications of research? Uh,
Other classifications, we'll be seeing them maybe in the references. I will show you
mm,
where did I get this. it can be historical research when we're talking about history. It can be qualitative, as we said. It can be correlational, experimental, and simulation research, logical argumentation, and case studies, or combined strategies. So there are many types that are very technical, and they exist in the literature, as I will show you by the end of the presentation.
Okay, so how about evidence-based practice and
Evidence-based
design?
practice.
What is it?
Okay, so as we said in a previous slide, there is two types of basis for our practice or research. So it's either evidence-based or knowledge-based research or practice. Practice. So the evidence-based practice is when it has always been. Before that, it has always been based on experimentation and on experience and on how tradition goes and how we the way it was always done. So this was before the evidence-based practice. When the evidence when we started doing research and started having conclusions in our research and stuff, so and we had now evidence and proofs of certain topics. So we have used this, what is called the evidence-based practice, that is based on evidence done by research. And likewise, there is evidence-based design. Evidence-based design is what when we make this design based on evidence of what is good or bad for the human living in this place or this environment. And this is used in many, actually right now, until this day, it is used in many areas, like in architecture, interior design, landscape design, facilities management, education, city planning, and it is used also in designing the healthcare facilities, because it is mainly towards the human benefit and what is good for the human, based on evidence and research.
Yeah, I think you mentioned hospital design. I think that is really a growing trend. In 2018, I was able to get hold of a new book. It's called Evidence-Based Design in Healthcare Planning.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, so can you expound more on its origins?
So the origin was when in 1984 there is this the Ulrich, who's a very renowned scientist in environmental psychology, who has done this experiment in a hospital. He has divided the patients. Some of them looked out of the window to see a tree, and others looked out of the window to see a wall. And he made this experiment to see the effects of both views on the patients. And by the end of this experiment, he has concluded that when the patients who have been seeing the tree has very higher levels of recovery and faster recovery and better better time in recovery and in healing. They were better to nursing staff and everyone around them than the people or the patients who were seeing or who were directly seeing this wall all day long. So from that came his evidence-based, that based on evidence from research, we can do a design that makes it a better environment for the human in any space.
Okay, and this interests me more. The model of incorporating research in the construction practice. So tell us more about this.
Yes, well, there is this researcher also, he's called Hamilton, and he came with 4 levels of incorporating the research in the construction practice. He made, like we are going to see in the next slide, the 4 levels. Or level 1 will be informed design decisions based on available literature and the state of art and technology. And level 2 will be the design decisions based on predictive performance and measurable outcomes. Level 3 will be results reported publicly with the objective of moving information on the methods. And level 4 will be publishing findings in peer-reviewed journals. So he categorized all kinds of and levels of to which extent are we going to involve research in our practice. So in the first level, it was only to have to keep the design decisions informed based on literature review and on recent research. In level 2, he had this done, which is involving the design decisions based on the research, and also getting away of any subjective decision that is not based on research. And in level 3 was that there is a peer review that makes the process more robust, which means that whatever research that we are reaching or reading, we have a peer review, and we have this kind of proof, additional proof to the validity and reliability of our research. And in level 4, we are incorporating research till the end, which means publishing the findings that this practice have found in a peer-reviewed journals. And this is something that we are going actually to see in our session 2, which very acknowledged firms like Perkins and Will has been doing. They have been publishing their own findings in peer-reviewed journals, although they are not research, they are not based on research. It's a completely, purely constructional oriented firm and design, of course. So now they are doing peer-reviewed research and they are publishing it. So this is somehow how it is going, how the level of incorporating research in practice is going, starting from the very least and minimal interaction or intersection between research and practice, which is only to just have some kind of knowledge to base our design on and our decisions on, till reaching the level of having peer-reviewed published articles from a design or construction practitioner. So this is how Hamilton has made this model. And as we are going to be seeing next time, how real firms and very acknowledged firms like Perkins and Will are really doing this now till level 4 of publishing their findings.
It would be very interesting. It would be very interesting to get hold of those researches. I hope Perkins and Will make it publicly accessible. So
it is. Yeah. There are many reports and many. Yes, I will show you next time the references of those published research. It's very, very interesting indeed. Yes.
Oh, that's great. So I think we're moving towards a different project phases, and this one now is about post-occupancy evaluation or probably post-construction researches.
Yes. So one of the major parts of research and practice, which is really done in reality, will be the post-occupancy evaluation. So whenever you deliver a project or you finalize a project, you deliver it and you give it to the owner, and khalas, the architect has done their work is done and everything is done and submitted. There is a post-occupancy when the building started to work and started to have the users use it and so on. We can make an assessment or a post-occupancy evaluation to assess the issues that, like acoustics, like the odor control, like the vibration, like lighting, like user friendliness, whether or not the building is user friendly, and all this. It can be like a form of survey or interview with the users focus groups and checklists and maybe yes or no questions for the users. And the goal of such evaluation would be to assess the satisfaction and measure the quality improvements as we go and as we are using this building. So this type of evaluation is a form of research indeed, and it exists actually also in healthcare facilities as well, because this is one of the major facilities where the satisfaction of the user is really important and put into consideration of the owners.
I think this is something that everybody should do after a turnover of the project, so that the concepts can be validated. If the concepts and the features that were implemented in the project really addressed the need, or the requirements of that project. Otherwise, and then I can just imagine, if we have this kind of data, we can actually make better informed decisions as we do probably the same project the next time we get into that, right? So how about knowledge based design and engineering?
So as we said, there is this evidence-based design and there is the knowledge-based design, which comes with the practice, which comes purely with the practice, with how it was going on, how we used to do it in tradition, and how the experience itself has accumulated and gained knowledge by itself. And this is the type of knowledge-based when we only depend, or we base our design decisions and outcomes on anything on our knowledge, our existing knowledge, and our accumulated knowledge in the fields. So this is one of the. It also has to do with the product life cycle, and mainly to evaluate a product life cycle and how it works in the product research. So this is another type of how we take design decisions. But at the end of the day, choosing which one are we going to be working with depends on the project and on whatever goal that we are having in our project.
So this product life cycle, when it refers to buildings, is probably the what we call the cradle to cradle building life cycle, right? So
yes,
let's just let's just read some of the comments. Hello, Mariam from Architect Julius Tadeo, and Murad says thank you, Architect Mariam. So
thank you, Murad. You're welcome. And
okay,
hello,
so
Architect Julius. So to sum it up, at the end of Brian, is how can we have to say, how can practice benefit from research? So because as a researchers, we are doing research not to be put in the drawers, not to be put in our offices, but we are doing research in order to make to be of benefit to the practice. So what can, which areas, what are the most trendy, what are the most applicable now areas that can use research in the practice would be the IBIM, for example, how the building information modeling is growing and how it's using now on-site applications in order to have the supervision, full supervision while on site, and having full access to all documents about the projects while you are on site. So this is a very trendy and very important domain where research is working hand in hand with practice. This is the first domain. The second domain will be cloud computing, which is a very interesting domain where now you can save everything online. You can have all your data or your files or your project related files and drawings saved online and shared online between all the stakeholders of the project, whether the construction, the AEC, or I'm sorry, the MEP engineer and the owner and everyone that is involved in the project. They will have all their files and everything shared in the cloud, whether it is in the project management domain, also on-site project management, and how technology is working to develop this area in construction, and as I said, also in digital fabrication, as we are seeing how the 3D printing techniques are growing, how it is working for interior design and for product design. This is another very, very important domain that research is working hand in hand with practice as well. And the heritage BIM and how the virtual reality works, whether to reconstruct virtual sites of historic areas or to be working on documenting and on using this virtual models in order to make a remodeling or a reconstruction in physical life, in real life. And at the end, in interior trends, how the interior trends, as I said, varied from the minimalist to how to use parametric design and how to use the nature inside the interior, and how to be maybe modern, maybe classic sometimes. So this is also subject to ongoing research, and this is very important when someone is working in interior design. So this is how, to sum it up, how can research affect the practice, and why it is very important to work hand in hand with research. Those resources that I have added at the end, like the architectural research methods, this is a very important book that if anyone is interested in doing research or having their thesis done, they can read it and have all type of information about how to write a research and what are the methods that can be used, and different methods and different tools and everything that has to do with writing an architecture or making an architectural research. The other one, which is Future of Architectural Research, this is done by it is published by Perkins and Will, and next session we are going to have some insights from this. It was a proceeding of a conference about research, of architectural research, and the final reference that we are having is how architects use research, and this one we are going to be working on the case studies from practice. It is published by REBA, and we are going to be working on the case studies for next session next week. So this is to sum it up. Yes.
Yeah. So this is not the end of our session with Architect Mariam. You can catch her again next week. That's July 14, again at 8 p.m. as we discuss more about research and how it applies to, particularly to the professional practice of architecture. So before we close, I'd like to invite everyone to tune in to Beyond Design every Tuesday. Every Tuesday at 8 p.m. if you're in the Philippines, but if you're in the Central Eastern Standard time zones like Egypt, and there are many of the countries in Europe, then that is 2 p.m. in your time zone. So once again, thank you very much, Mariam. This has been an enlightening session, not only for the audience but for me as well. I think if you were going to say that many professionals are guilty of not really doing research as often, probably that includes me. And it's really a challenge. It's a skill that is frequently overlooked, but that is really, as you said, it's really a necessity in the practice. And we will know more about that because we will see the case studies next week, and and especially as Architect Mariam shares about what Perkins and Will is doing in their firm. And yeah, we will learn about all of that next week. So thank you, Mariam. It's such a privilege to have you here and for preparing. Thank you very much for preparing all these visuals for our viewers to have a better understanding of what the topic is all about. And yeah, so there's one last comment that came in before we wrap up. Oh, that's from Helen Ramos. Thank you. The topics discussed are very timely and interesting. Thank you, Helen, for watching. Um,
Thank you,
so
Helen, and thank you, Brian. Yes, for everything. It was my honor, and I will be happy to talk again with you and with the audience about how architects use research in practice next week, and it will be a very interesting topic. So I welcome everyone already to join us, and I will see you all next week. Hopefully,
okay,
yes.
there's one more from Architect McCoy. Looking forward to the next session. Okay, so
Thank
that's
you, Mako.
that's it. It has been a really wonderful and productive night having you with us, and we're excited to see you again next week. So okay,
Thank you so
so
much. Yes, I'm excited as
yeah,
well. Yeah, thank you. And see you
yeah.
everyone next week,
See
inshallah.
you next
Okay.
week. Okay, good night. Bye bye.
Bye bye.